Hello, everybody. This is Clara Solera with Architecture Talk Tank. This is like a historical moment for me because my guest today is David Drazil, who created this incredible community online called Sketch Like an Architect that leaks into many different interesting kind of modalities, online courses, books, a community, also organizing events. And we've been floating in the same digital space for many years now, actually connected probably over 2 years ago, I think, but we've never done that. So I'm super excited for this one. And thank you, David, for joining me today.
Hi, Sarah, and hello to everyone who's joining us. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I'm urging to deep dive into it because you're such an interesting persona. So why don't you just quickly introduce yourself to my audience, and then we can talk a little bit about the different projects you're involved with.
Right. Thank you. I usually like to say real quick, I'm an architect who loves to sketch, and I studied architecture both here in Prague, Czech Republic, where I come from, as well as in Denmark, where I did my master's degree. And I also worked as an architect for a couple of years in Denmark, different places, but mostly studios in Copenhagen. And a few years back in 2019, we moved back together with my wife. We grew, we started a family. And since then, I kind of dive deep into the Sketch Like an Architect online project, which was a side hustle up until then from 2017. That's where it started. And yeah, the coming back was kind of an impulse for me to see, and let's like give it a try. Let's give it a try and see where it goes. And I never look back, actually, and it's nicely growing very slowly, organically. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about it, but I'm really excited to be building this kind of ecosystem around the things that I love and still be connected to architecture, even though it's not a traditional practice, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not traditional practice, but somehow you're managing to shine with your unique passion for sketching. And in fact, thought leadership, it's kind of a term that became popular, but I think that with every single project you do, you really do it in a way that is almost like a role model. I mean, for many of us that are creating content. So I wanted to talk a little bit to this ecosystem because I'm fascinated by that as a business model. It definitely orients itself around knowledge and teaching. But tell us a little bit more about what drew you to it in the first place, and how did you, from the beginning, sort of create that ecosystem and where it is now?
Right. I had no idea when it started and how it started. And now, in hindsight, I understand a little bit better why it had the chance to take off in the first place. But it started with a problem. And the problem is something that I experienced during my master studies in Denmark, where there were a lot of people. There was a very international environment of both Danish people as well as people from all around Europe. And what I've experienced is that not everybody was taught how to draw in school, or there was different level of emphasis on drawing as a tool, not for artistic purposes on their own, but more as a design tool, as a thinking tool, as a tool for understanding and communicating ideas and things like that. And not everybody had developed that kind of nice relationship with them, with sketching. And during those 2 years, there was a lot of group work, and we worked in small teams, like 2 to 5, 6 people. And it really showed in the communication within the team, internally as well as externally, who has this kind of sense for visual communication. And it was very tightly related to hand sketching and hand drawing. Those skills really translates into normal drawings, into CAD drawings, into diagrams, into visualizations, into pretty much everything we as architects use to present ourselves. And that was kind of the pivotal moment where I realized, hey, we had quite a number of years drilling different drawing techniques in my bachelor studies here in Prague. And I thought maybe I could share a thing or two to help other people just get started with it and develop that nice relationship with sketching for architecture, for design. So I can put my ideas on paper in a nice way. I can use it to understand my own thoughts better. And I can also use it to iterate and brainstorm ideas, as well as to communicate them to others, right? Whether they're peers, their colleagues, or my bosses, or its client, or its architectural jury. There are many different kind of target groups where I want to communicate, but it's still the same kind of tool and approach. And I thought it was kind of important, and it was kind of being overshadowed by all the technology that we've been using and we started using in the last like 2-3 decades, starting with CAD and BIM and all the real-time rendering and augmented reality and virtual reality and all that stuff, right? It's so shiny, it's so sexy, it's great. And I'm actually a big fan of all of those. But I just believe that there is so much value and benefits in having the foundation in the traditional sketching and drawing. So it didn't happen overnight, but this was kind of going through my mind at the end of my master's degree. And when we graduated, I took a bit of time to start developing content around it. And I started on Instagram, and I started developing my first book. I didn't know it was gonna turn out as a book, but it turned out so big that it's actually became a book. And my first course, and I started sharing this publicly with other people. And I started on Instagram in 2016, late 2016, just because I found it to be less intimidating than to start my own website. I didn't really know how to start my own website. So, hey, everybody's talking about Instagram, right? So let's give it a try. So it was a lot of these lucky moments that led me to create more content around it. And I have to say, it was from the get-go, it was always mostly kind of focused on educational value. On really, I didn't want to share just nice images and nice sketches to kind of show off, but I wanted to provide value in a sense. Okay, here's an image, it works. Let's break it down to see what principles are used to make it work and how you can use them in your own illustrations to make them better next time. So it was more about really sharing what I assumed that would be helpful to other people. And the more content I created, the more feedback I got back around, okay, what resonates, what doesn't, what are people asking about? And a lot of these community-based interactions and engagement, it really showed the path for more of the content, both free as well as paid products that were created later on. So yeah, and this was like the beginning of 2017. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love it. I kind of came across this idea of like online platforms and thought leadership a little bit later than you did. And so when I started to look into influencers and content creators within our industry, I found you. And you already had a lot of those things in place, your books, your courses. I think you were even at that time organizing an event online. So it was just interesting to see how that one passion and that problem you're speaking to, which, by the way, I think is very valid. I remember myself when I was studying architecture, I was extremely intimidated by seeing, for example, either other colleagues or maybe even friends in architecture that had those beautiful notepads, right, with really good drawings in them. And basically, if you have that real talent in your hand for drawing, you can create really beautiful sketches. And if someone doesn't get the training in it or is not so good in it, it can be very intimidating to express yourself that way. And I think right now, being exposed to digital drawing, it's very easy to fall into that, I'll just become really good drafter and not use my hands for sketches. And I only went back to it to really sketch when I started to work in the practice, and I had to communicate my ideas. And it was just kind of thinking about what it could look like, and you start sketching plan sections, elevations of it, just to design before you go into CAD.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think the practicality of it spoke volumes above whether it looks good or not. But I don't think I ever really learned to sketch as beautifully as you do, So it's like, I think despite the fact that we have access to tools, it's still really, really practical to know how to sketch. It doesn't have to be beautiful, but just to be able to put your ideas on paper and communicate it with your other architect colleague before you start, doing it digitally. So for sure, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the community, because you speak to that, and I do see that your community is extremely active. And it was this beautiful feedback loop where you've learned from them as well. What else can you explore and, perhaps add into the courses? Or so tell me a little bit about community building. Who is mostly interested in following you, and how did that community grow over time? And is there any interesting stories you can share about potentially the friendships you established through that?
Yeah. Now I see that I think there are two main buckets when we speak about my audience, my community, and we can divide them kind of into professionals and non-professionals. So if I start with the professionals, obviously it's architecture students, architects, interior designers, landscape designers, even some civil engineers and related professions. And that's the professionally oriented part of my audience, right? They do it because of it's kind of required, or it's nice to have skill in our profession to communicate ideas. And the non-professional audience is actually super strong as well. And most of them, I believe, are part of what is called urban sketching, and they are urban sketchers. It's a kind of, I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's a big kind of movement, which is mostly about just going outside and drawing plein air, drawing on spot in different places. It can be in nature, it can be in cities. And it's that I always say that kind of typical scenario when you travel to some nice city in Italy and you find a nice cozy plaza and you order your espresso and you just sketch the church that's on that plaza maybe. So that's kind of the urban sketching vibe, basically describing the feeling of a place with your sketch and documenting. Again, it's not about perfection at all. It's more about the experience and documenting it. So I think that's also a big part of my community, who benefits from learning about perspective, who benefits from learning about design principles, how light and shadow works, how scale and proportion works. So they can all input these little principles into their own sketches to make them a little bit more convincing and better in a way that they want to see them. And it's funny, it started for me, it started on Instagram in those 2016, and people started commenting on different posts that I made, and I documented the work as I was building my first course about architectural sketching, and I was kind of sharing sneak peeks and bits and pieces. And I remember one time I shared just a mock-up, a Photoshop mock-up of a little handbook with some of these tips, and people started asking where can they buy it. I was like, what? How do you mean where can you buy? It's not, I'm just sharing what I'm, it's not for, it's not even finished. What are you asking about, really? And then it was like a real click for me, like, okay, maybe it's on one way I'm building this video course, but obviously people are also interested in just maybe an ebook about sketching. So then I started researching places. How can I put together an ebook and sell an ebook online? And that's where it all started. So it was very much kind of community-based, community-driven, and it still is up to date. So whenever I try to create a new product, it starts with my audience and their questions and their problems that they're reaching out to me. And it always kind of is more like a dialogue with them to see, okay, I'm really trying to understand where they come from, what's their situation, what's their problem, what is it that they need to have solved, and how I can help in there. And then we can talk about, okay, how can I turn it into a product or service that would be actually helpful for my audience right now. So a lot of interactions over the years, obviously, and it grew not only on Instagram, but mainly on newsletter, on different platforms, on YouTube, and it grew over the years. But I think like listening to your people, actually listening is one of the most important things to keep not only the relationship healthy, but also just to serve them and help them better.
Absolutely. Oh my God, this is so interesting. I mean, I asked you before about this creators economy, and you described it so well, that basically it's the need, the problem, but also being open to create, or let's just say provide that content in many different mediums, right? And I wanted to speak specifically to these mediums. You mentioned online courses, you mentioned books, and some sort of PDF downloads, perhaps a handbooks or workbooks, whatever you call them. But there is more. So would you tell me a little bit as to how you kind of grew into other mediums as well to provide either experiences or perhaps coaching or collaborate one-on-one, and within the courses as well? I mean, that's a full other experience for people too, but all oriented around the same principle of knowledge sharing around one passion.
Yeah, right. You're completely right that different people like to learn in different ways, and some are great just with text-based learning. They want to read a book or they want to see some images. Some a little bit more demonstration, which is great through video, either pre-recorded or live, like we're having right now. Some of them really like the live experience of an online summit that you know a thing or two about, right? And I think like the top level of the so-called kind of product ladder would be the one-on-one coaching, where it's really very exclusive and also a little bit more intimate experience, where you get to talk to the other people one-on-one for an hour or something. So I think, yeah, the Sketch Like an Architect ecosystem is kind of built on these different parts that are things that my audience is enjoying and that I'm enjoying. It kind of needs to intersect. So, for example, with I just told you the little story about the first ebook, and it wasn't just an ebook and an online course for a while, and people kept saying that it's nice that it's an ebook and they can download a PDF, a digital thing, but they would really like to have it on their on their bookshelf. It's a different experience. The tactility. I love books myself, and it's a different experience when you can flip through a book and you have a physical copy somewhere in your home. So from that, after I don't know how many years, I think the first book I launched it in 2020. So it was at least 3 years after the ebook, and it's a completely different process, production process, as well as marketing and sales process. And also very different like revenue structure compared to digital products. So there was a lot to learn, but it was very exciting to dive into new products which are more in this physical world compared to all the digital downloadables that you can get. And they're kind of some may not perceive them as valuable as physical real things. So it's again, it speaks to a little bit different people. Depending on how they like to learn, how they like to experience new things. So it just grew very, very organically. Again, people ask for this, then people ask for the book. Online courses were kind of a given because I was really enjoying a lot of online courses back then myself, and I still do up to this date. So it's kind of natural format for me that I enjoy both consuming as well as creating. And I think the biggest beast, and you can tell more, is hosting an online event, online summit, online conference where you invite a bunch of other people and you try to coordinate everything and provide value at the same time, while it might be live or pre-recorded, but it's very typically like time limited for a few days or a week or something, right? So that was at the point, it was actually suggested by my mentor, Ankur Nagpal, who is, or he used to be, a founder and CEO of Teachable, which is still the platform that I use for hosting my online courses. He sold the company now and he's onto something else, but I had a chance to be mentored by him for over a year, and it was a great time of growth where he shared a lot of things. And one of the things he suggested that I do was to host an online summit. And I said, absolutely not. That's crazy. I've never done that. I have no idea how to do it. So many moving parts, so many people, like, absolutely not. And it kind of, it boiled down with me, and I got more and more excited. And that was, again, I think in 2020, we've done the first Archi Mentors Summit. And yeah, this year I've done a third edition. It shifted the focus from broad architecture just to architecture sketching and drawing, both analog and digital. But that's been one of the greatest way how to also connect with other peers and people in this space who are doing kind of the similar thing, and just bring all these amazing people together under one roof, under one umbrella, in one time, to share their expertise and wisdom and advice. And people really love that. It's so hard to pull off, especially if you have a small team, but it's definitely worth it. So I managed to do them once a year. That's my top event of the year. But it usually takes like half a year of planning in advance. So yeah, just to come back, it's a very broad ecosystem of different products and services. And that's, I think, one of the things that I love the most about building your own online business.
Absolutely. There's so many interesting things that you shared. I really lean to the story of mentorship and the fact that you surrounded yourself also by a mentor. I honestly wouldn't have been where I am, and I still surround myself by mentors, but even the very beginnings of everything, it's kind of a new industry to step into. And being able to be coached into it is so important. And I think that, part of actually what we're passing on, organizing events and sharing knowledge, is actually kind of providing that value, moving it further to the audiences that we have. And I think it's so important to not only surround yourself and keep learning, but also to share that knowledge, which solidifies and share it with others. I think that's whole aspect of being keen to learn, being inquisitive about things, understanding, okay, I want to step into a new thing. How do I do it? Perhaps I ask someone who's more experienced. That whole thing is actually kind of the personality of this business. Like, that's what it's all about. And I love it, and I think what gives me also the most energy is when I surround myself, or what I do attracts the people that also want to learn, or are inquisitive like that. And I think that that's really the quality of an entrepreneur, is that you kind of set a vision as to where you want to go, and you ask, how can I get there? And you understand that you're open to learning. And I love the fact that you shared that you've been mentored, and you also shared about, your kind of first response to it, absolutely not, but then went out of your comfort zone and did that. So I applaud you for that. That's really what entrepreneurship stands for. And there's been success that followed as well, which is tremendous. So well done on that. I wanted to ask you a little bit, you speak about online courses. I've put together an online course myself, and I know the sort of, the process, which it might seem easy, especially if you consider yourself an expert in what you're wanting to teach, but actually structuring that is not that easy. And I can imagine, specifically with something like sketching, there is maybe a lot and not so much to talk about. It can go both ways in a way, because it's a skill. There is a technical part to it. You've certainly one oriented around history of sketching. So how did you navigate through putting your expertise together? And did you have some kind of system to guide you to actually extract your experience and what you've learned and what you wanted to translate into an easy to follow format, organized into lessons and modules, which essentially what an online course is?
Right. I think it started. I was lucky with the first one because it's kind of a beginner's course. It's a 6-step framework that takes you through the beginnings, through the foundations of architectural sketching, which is in a way that I perceive it, and I was lucky to keep it simple. Because it can grow into so many directions, but I think it's really important to keep that target, ideal avatar, that persona in mind and create it for that one person and be focused on the transformation. Okay, so what is it? What is the real value of the online course? It's not the information. We have abundance of information, but it's a transformation that the people will go through from A to B. They start somewhere, not knowing, not being confident, not knowing where to start, not being able to draw straight lines or understand perspective. And you take them through a process and they are able to draw beautifully composed perspective sketches and they understand it, right? So I think focusing on the transformation as the main value of an online course, because most online courses are just gathered different pieces of information from all around the world and internet, and they can be found in different places. But one of the values is that it's nicely structured and put together, and it saves you a lot of time on that specific transformation that you're seeking. So basically, what you're paying for with online courses most often is this condensed, structured approach as a shortcut for the result that you want to get. And sometimes you also pay extra for an access, a different level of access to either community or coaching, live, monthly Zoom calls, things like that, which actually takes active time from that tutor. But with my first course, I kept it super simple. I followed this 6-step framework. It goes from 2D objects and lines to perspective. When you have perspective, what do? You need to add some kind of texture and shading. So there's the next chapter. You need to add people and vegetation, talking about scale. That's another chapter. And the last chapter is about putting it all together. So I kept it very, very simple. And it's actually a very short course. I think it's total around 1 hour, 1.5. So, and it kind of kept my approach to building courses in that way. So I don't want my students to have to sit through hours and hours of content. Yes. That's not what the course is about. I want to give them results as fast as possible. So that's why it's condensed and simplified, and it's very much project-based learning, and they learn by doing themselves. So that's one of the key aspects. If they don't do the work, they won't get anywhere, right? So I think these principles are something that I started with my first course, and I continue with all other courses. And it just gets more, I think, sophisticated around the market research and audience and avatar creations, and really niching down who is this for and who is this not for. And in that sense, it gets a little bit more complex. But otherwise, yeah, the philosophy is still the same. Get the results you want as soon as possible. I think that's the real value.
Absolutely. And I think especially, when your audience are architects, whether they're students or in profession, we are kind of known for having very little personal time. And so I think it's really important to cater for, lack of time in the industry, because that's, I guess, what your audience is like. Tell me a little bit about your experience with Domestika. You created a course with them. And that is amazing. I mean, I saw the production a little bit, and you guys were filming in a studio. I think you flew to Spain, right, to do that.
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
great! Tell me a little bit more about that.
that was very, very, very exciting. Kind of a milestone last year. Last year in March, there was the shooting week in Madrid, Spain, and there was a pre-production for a few months. But it was super exciting for me as a solo content creator who is used to do everything by himself. You know, from marketing, from scripting, from shooting, from editing, just everything. Also the lighting and figuring out the audio, just everything you have to do yourself if you're the only person. And it was really exciting to experience the Domestika way, because Domestika is like, I've said it before in some video, it's like a huge online course manufacturer. It's like a huge machine producing hundreds of online courses every year, right? And they have systems and they have specialized people for each and every profession. And it was really interesting to see how they do it at a big, massive scale, from the very beginning, from planning stages, all the way through the production and launch and marketing, and just scaling it around it. So a lot of learning for me how to approach in a more effective way the whole online
Awesome.
course production. It usually takes months. There's a lot of research. There is a lot that comes into scripting and preparing everything for the shoot, including your own studio and the lighting and the sound and all the technicalities. And also just pre-launching and sharing a lot with your audience, so they are prepared for what's to come. And ideally you have some already feedback around it, so you're creating something that they will not only like, but they will need. So in this way, it was really amazing. And I think I was at interesting spot where I already had some experience with building online courses myself, and this was just another level on how professionals do it on massive scale. So I have only good things to say about Domestika and the people. I mean, the people were amazing, very professional, very young teams as well. And the whole experience, both when we worked kind of remotely, as well as the shooting week in Madrid, it was just very smooth. So many things can go wrong, so many. And it wasn't after the pandemic. We were still in the late kind of pandemic times. So it was a little bit more complicated, but everything went pretty smooth. So their planning and managing everything is really top notch, and I'm very excited for the result. Yeah, it's been mostly great experience for me.
That sounds amazing. I mean, how tiring it has been for you to literally just sit there for a week talking to a camera. I mean, I experienced that recording my own course, and I was exhausted sometimes, especially when I had to do like B-rolls or retakes. I would just sit there like talking to the camera for 8 hours nonstop, which, as you see with the amount of interviews and things, it still kind of carries through my everyday work schedule. But to be honest, it's very exhausting. So how did you find that?
Yeah, the week was quite intensive, to say at least. But the great thing was that every time there were at least 2 or 3 other people in the shooting studio with you. There was production manager and 2 filmmakers, and they take care of most of the annoying stuff. They tell you what to say. You have a script you've written before, and they give you hints what to talk about next, and they kind of take care of you looking good, being with the lights good, sounding good, everything. They take care of it. So the only job you have there is to do your part.
Oh, wow.
And it's so actually, it's still exhausting. You still do full days of work, but everything else is taken care of by the team. So that helps a lot. So I think even people who are not experienced in any way in front of camera, or they're not used to talking and stuff, they can go through this process because, yeah, I think Domestika built smart enough and efficient enough systems around it to make it work. So this was actually super nice. So a lot of the stuff was handled by other people, professionals, and there were so many more people, including social media, including videographers, and a lot higher management that I didn't get to see at all or that much. So there are so many people involved behind it that you don't really know about. And yeah, it's like a small film production. And have you ever wondered why there are so many people listed in the final title at the end of the film? Yeah, right. It's very often dozens or hundreds of people that you never see, but they are absolutely essential to do the job. And it's similar on maybe a little bit smaller scale than huge film production here, but it's still like that. So even though you see only me on the camera, there are a bunch of people around taking care of me and making sure that it looks good, that it sounds good. I say what I need to say, and I do what I need to do. So in that way, you are very much like guided by hand to do that. Also, so you can make it through in just 1 week. Usually, it takes 3 to 5 days with them. So yeah.
How exciting. Did you have to put together a completely unique course for that? So therefore, I'm guessing you extracted some of the things that you already were teaching in your own courses, but in fact, that course is unique.
No, it's completely unique. We've created something absolutely new from scratch. And I didn't want to kind of duplicate the things that I have exactly in my books or exactly in my especially first course. So it was brand new, and it was kind of a little mid area between analog and digital sketching. So in my first courses, I focus on traditional analog sketching. Excuse me. And in this way, in this Domestika course, we focused on how to start with traditional analog and then how to take it to digital and post-process it in Photoshop, which is one cool way how to create your own unique visual style. So that was the main focus on this course, and it's been something new that we've created from scratch, completely new project, and everything around it was new. The only thing that were taken from my books were some of the foundational parts that are kind of prerequisites for making the sketch in traditional analog sense, but everything else was absolutely new. So yeah, it's the positioning and marketing of that was just completely different, and I wanted to be separated a little bit from what I've already done in the past, so it can be uniquely kind of positioned within the market.
That makes so much sense. So tell me, I mean, it sounds great. I actually wanted to point out, because the purpose of this podcast is talk about also business, how incredible it is that with all of those different efforts and all of those different projects, you actually have a diverse income source. And I think that that's kind of the point of creator economy, to diversify your income. And I think that you've built quite a great imperium now to sort of be able to sit back and see probably returns from your books and from courses on their own. And then additionally, of course, the projects that you do, like the conferences and other things. I wanted to ask you specifically whether you are available to do coaching, if you do any one-on-one, and if that's also included, let's just say, in the package that you provide.
Yeah, that's interesting that you ask. It again evolved very organically and without me knowing and realizing all the business stuff. It started like at the bottom of the product ladder with kind of low priced ebooks. Then it went up with the online courses, and kind of the one-on-one coaching as a little bit higher than that. and it just evolved very naturally and organically when people themselves reached out for more personal guidance. So I didn't think of it myself again from the start, because I was more focused on creating different passive income streams so that the revenue from them would not be directly tied to my active time, right?
Yes.
In that way, passive. Otherwise, they take a lot of work. They're not like passive. But doing the active part, like coaching or commissioned illustrations and things like that, I like to, add it to the mix because it kind of keeps me closer to the industry and the people that I'm helping and serving. And I've started, I think, a few years back to work with very limited, like a handful of people one-on-one. So I have very limited spots, and we always have like 1 hour a week or bi-weekly. And it's very much customized. It's kind of on top of the normal ecosystem that I offer. For instance, I work a lot recently with architects and interior designers and also landscape designers on switching their workflow from traditional analog sketching to digital sketching on iPad with different apps, because they found out it can be a lot more efficient. They can work remotely. They can edit it real fast. They can share it with their colleagues or bosses, or they can send it to whoever. They can work, on a train, in a cafe, and they can also take it to the construction site, take a photo, draw on top of it. There are just so many advantages. And I really like that it marries the both benefits of traditional sketching, where I believe that the main benefit is your connection between your hand and your mind. So you get that flow, and you get that instant connection, and your problem solving skills and your creativity is at its peak, and it's much more natural than if you're clicking through your mouse and keyboard in some strange AutoCAD user interface, which I never liked. So it's a very different feel, right? And you can take that and do it actually on iPad or other similar tablets and get all the digital apps, all the digital benefits and features on top of it. So like non-destructive workflow, so you can work on multiple alternatives and you can edit them at all times. And there's just so much more. So very often recently, we're working with a few clients one-on-one, how they can make the switch to digital sketching and incorporate it in their own workflow. They are practicing professionals, so they have some templates and systems and workflows that they are used to. And we're working on learning the new apps and how they can implement it into their current workflows that are working to make them even more efficient. I was talking the other day with one interior designer, and she would, of course, find it so much beneficial if she could take a photo of an apartment which is about to be refurbished or reconstructed and draw something into that photo, into that perspective, right on spot to get a quick feedback from the client. It's so much faster. And then she can take it home or wherever, send it to a colleague and work on it on computer if that needs to be. But just being on spot and being able to come up with something very tangible, that makes the communication a lot quicker and more effective, and they can save a lot of time while actually impressing the client that they can be really quick on their feet about the design, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of these stories and kind of situations that I get to dive in with my coaching clients, and it's really exciting part. It takes a lot of active time on both sides. It's a commitment, it's an investment. So I don't do plenty of that, but it really, I think, is very beneficial for both sides. And for me, it provides a great insight into what is it that they really struggle with or they need to get solved. And it's another part that I'm very excited in my little ecosystem thing.
I love that. I love that. It's amazing. I mean, we talked about all this journey and all the different projects we're engaged with. I loved listening to that because, you know, I'm kind of in the same business doing very similar things. And I went through some of these experiences myself. And it's just great hearing how your journey went, all the opportunities you got along the way. And also thanks for sharing about, you know, your work with private clients. I think that potentially my audience can find that useful. So I guess to wrap up, where can people find you online or, you know, on social media in order to connect if they were interested?
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. The best way I would start is my website. Just go to sketchlikeanarchitect.com and you can take it from there. But of course, I'm on Instagram at David_Drazil. Just search for my name. The same for YouTube. And yeah, mostly all social media. I'm not on TikTok, and that's on purpose for now. I don't want to be spread too thin, but that's for now. Mostly the website, ideally my newsletter, which I treat a little bit more intimately, and that's the people who know everything in the first. That they're the first to know about everything happening under the Sketch Like an Architect roof. So yeah, if you'd like to reach out, definitely you can via website or just any social media. Yeah,
Sounds perfect.
I'll be happy to chat.
Thank you so much for joining Architecture Talk Tank, joining me to talk about your projects and business. All the best. I'll be keeping my eye and following your projects, and I hope to connect soon.
Yeah, I hope to keep in touch. And again, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, David, and thank you to everyone who connected. Take care and see you at the next one.